I've worked as a night security guard for a few years now. It's not a bad gig, easy money for the most part, and the quiet is something I've grown to appreciate after all in this job. A peaceful night means a successful night. The building I'm stationed at is a corporate office downtown, one of those glass towers that looks impressive during the day, but feels is almost haunted when it's empty at night most nights. I'm the only one here. I sit in the security office, monitor the cameras, patrol the hallways a couple of times and lock up the place. It's monotonous, but I prefer it that way. The quiet hum of the building systems, the soft glow of the security monitors, it all became routine. Then there's Martin, he's the janitor on the same shift as me, and from the moment I met him, something about him didn't sit right. He's an older guy, probably in his late 50s or early 60s, with thinning gray hair and a way of moving that's too quiet. I don't know if it's his hunched posture or the way he'll wait toe appear without making a sound, but I can never shake the feeling that he's watching me, even when I don't see him at first. It was just a gut feeling, nothing I could put my finger on. He was polite enough, keeping to himself and occasionally nodding if we passed each other in the hallways. But over time the strength started to add upon a night. I was doing my usual rounds, checking the locks, walking the hallways, when I saw him standing in one of the empty offices on the 16th floor. The lights were off, but the glow from the hallway illuminated him just enough. He wasn't cleaning, he was just standing, the rest staring out the window. His reflection in the glass looked wrong, distorted somehow. I stood there, a moment unsure of whether to say something. It felt like I was intruding, even though I was technically the one supposed to be there. Finally I cleared my throat. "Everything okay, Martin?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Hadn't turned around, completely ignoring me. He just kept staring out window. Awaited a few more seconds before walking away. The unease is settling deep in my gut. That was the first time I felt like something was seriously off with him. But it was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing other things, small things at first, but enough to raise alarm bells in the back of my mind. For Martin would always be in places where he had no reason to be. The janitorial staff had their designated areas, but I'd find him wandering the upper floors at odd hours, sometimes just standing in the middle of a hallway, as if waiting for something. The worst part, he would always seem to vanish the moment I turned the corner. I'd see him in the reflection of the glass doors, but by the time I reached that spot, he was gone. I tried telling myself I was being paranoid. It's easy for the mind to play tricks when you're alone at night in a massive empty building. But then things started happening that I couldn't explain. It started with the camera son. I was watching the security monitors when I noticed static on one of the feeds. That's not unusual. The cameras glitch from time to time, but this was different. The static would flicker for a second, and then Martin would appear on the screen, standing perfectly still in a hallway. I knew I had just checked. He wouldn't move, wouldn't clean, just stand there staring at something off camera. Then just as suddenly the feed would cut out, and when it came back, he'd begun. At first I chalked it up to a technical error, but it kept happening. Always the same camera, always the same unsettling image of him standing in the middle of the hallway, staring into nothingness. And then there were the items. Things started going missing from my desk. Up in here, achy card there. I thought maybe I was just being careless, until I found them in strange places. An office supply close that hadn't been used in months, or a stairwell nobody ever used. How were they getting there? And why? The night everything changed, I had decided to confront Martin. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow involved in the strange happenings around the building. I didn't know if he was messing with metering to scare me or if something darker was going on, but I needed answers. It was a little past 2 a.m. She was on the lower level near the basement, a place I never had any reason to go. I watched as she stood outside one of the main tenants' rooms, his hand resting on the door this time. I wasn't going to just watch. I grabbed my flashlight and headed downstairs, moving as quickly and quietly as I could. The lower level was colder than the rest of the building, the air thick with the fume of the HVAC system. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls, amplifying the growing sense of dread in my chest. When I reached the main tenant's room, the door was slightly ajar and Martin was nowhere to be seen. I hesitated for a second before pushing it open. Inside, the room was filled with cleaning supplies, tools, and spare parts for the building systems, but something felt wrong. Somehow I shined my flashlight around the beam, cutting through the dimly lit space. And that's when I saw what a door, not a regular door. This one was hidden behind a large metal shelving unit, almost as if someone had intentionally tried to conceal it. My heart raced as I moved the shelf aside, revealing the door fully. There was no handle, just a small keyhole and a rusted plaque that read "Authorized personnel only." I knew I shouldn't go, and every instinct told me to turn back, to leave this room and forget I had ever seen it. But my curiosity and fear drove me forward. I found a key on one of the shelves that fit the lock, and with a deep breath, It turned it, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow stairwell that led down into darkness. I don't know what possessed me to go down those stairs. Maybe it was a need to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind, that there was a logical explanation. Everything that had been happening, or maybe it was the realization that I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. The stairs seemed to go on forever, the air growing colder and heavier. With each step the smell hit me, first musty, damp, and something else, something metallic. My flashlight flickered as I reached the bottom, casting long, distorted shadows against the cracked cement walls. At the end of the hallway was another door. This one, even older, its wood warped and splintering with age. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle, the cold metal sent a shiver up my arm, and with a sense of impending dread, I pushed it open. What is a inside will haunt me for the rest of my life. The room was small, no bigger than a storage closet, but it was filled with items, boxes and shelves, overflowing with photographs, clothing, personal effects. And then there were the more disturbing things, stuffs of hair, blood-stained rags and bones. I stumbled backward, barely able to comprehend. What I was seeing in the center of the room was a small, rusted coat, and on it lay a faded photograph of a fan family. Martin's family. Suddenly the door behind me slammed shut. It spun around, my flashlight beam shaking as I frantically searched for a way out. And that's when I saw Martin. He was standing in the doorway, his expression calm, his eyes glinting in the dim light. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know, had been waiting for this moment. You shouldn't have come down here, he said softly, his voice barely above whisper. It took haste back, my heart racing, my mind scrambling for a way out. What is this place? I asked, my voice is shaking. Marin smiled, a low, sinister smile that sent chills down my spine. This is said, gesturing to the room around him, is where I keep the things I care about. I felt bile rise in my throat as I realized what he meant. This wasn't just a storage room, it was a shrine at home. I didn't wait for him to move. I bolted toward the door, pushing past him with all the strength I could muster. Here ached out, trying to grab me, but I managed to break free, running up the stairs two at a time. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps, sheavy and deliberate. But I didn't look back. I burst through the door at the top of the stairs, slamming its hut behind me. My hands shook as if fumbled with the lock. I didn't stop running until I was back in the security offices, slamming the door and locking it behind me. I called the police, my fingers trembling as I dialed, barely able to explain what had happened. The police arrived within minutes, but when they searched the building, Martin was gone. The room in the basement was exactly as I had left it, but there was no sign of him. They found evidence enough to launch a full investigation, but to this day they've never found him. I quit the job the next morning. It's been months since that night, but I still can't shake the feeling that he's out there watching, waiting. And sometimes late at night is where I can hear the sound of his footsteps echoing down the empty hallways, just like before. Only now I'm not there to stop him. When I first took the night shift at the office, I wasn't thrilled, but the extra pay was too good to pass up. My department was on a deadline for a huge project, and someone needed to stay late to monitor progress and make sure everything was on track. I volunteered, figuring it would be just a few quiet hours of catching up on work without distractions. The office building itself was your typical corporate setup, rows of cubicles, a break room with a coffee machine that never worked right, and fluorescent lights that buzzed just enough to drive you crazy during the day. The place was bustling with people, the hum of phones ringing and keyboards clacking filling the air. But at night, when everyone else had gone home, it felt different. There's something unsettling about an empty office at night. The rows of cubicles stretched, amazeth emergency lighting casting strange shadows. I could hear every little sound, the creak of the building settling, the faint hum of the air conditioning. Even my own breathing seemed too loud at first. The quiet was our relief. I liked the solitude, the peace of it all. But after a few nights, the pieces started to feel more like isolation. And then strange things began to happen. One night, I was working on our port when I heard a faint rustling sound coming from across the room. I looked up, expecting to see one of the cleaning crew, but the office was shrugged it off, figuring it was just some building system kicking in. But the sound kept coming, papers shuffling, chairs creaking, as if someone was moving around just out of sight. It was subtle, almost too subtle to notice at first. But once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. I stood up and walked around the office, checking the cubicles, but there was noon. There, the building was old. I reminded myself, buildings make noises. That's all it was. But and things started to get weirder the next night. I came back from a break to find the papers in my desk scattered across the floor. At first, I thought maybe I had knocked them off without realizing it, but as I bent down to pick them up, I noticed something strange. The papers weren't just scattered. They were arranged, spread out in a way that seemed deliberate. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I was the only one in the office, wasn't. I checked the security system. All the doors were locked, and noon had come in or out since I arrived. I laughed it off, telling myself it was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That's when the footsteps started. It was late, probably close to midnight, and I was working on some spreadsheets, the glow of my monitor the only light in the office. I was deep into my work when I heard footsteps echoing down the hallway, just outside the cubicles. It froze my fingers, shoving over the keyboard. The sound, unmistakable, someone was walking down the hallway toward me. I strained to listen, trying to figure out who it could be. Maybe someone from the cleaning crew had arrived late, or maybe another employee had decided to pull an all-nighter, but no matter how hard I listened, I couldn't hear any doors opening or closing, nor rustling of cleaning supplies. Just those footsteps. I stood up, my chair creaking as I pushed it back. Hello. I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the empty office. No response. I stepped out of my cubicle, peeking around the corner in the hallway. It was empty. The footsteps had stopped. My heart was racing now, and I could feel a cold sweat forming on the back of my neck. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that I was hearing things because I was tired, but deep down I knew something was wrong. I went back to my desk, but I couldn't focus. Every little sound, the hum of the air conditioning, the soft clicking of the clock set my nerves whinging. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing there watching me, but noon. There, a few nights later, the situation reached a new level. I was sitting at my desk, finishing up a report, when I saw something out of the corner of my eye, shadow moving across the wall behind. It was quick, just a flicker, but it was enough to make me turn around. There was nothing there. I turned back to my computer. I tried to focus, but the shadow kept appearing just at the edge of my vision. It was like someone was standing behind me. You know that indistinguishable feeling that there's a presence behind you, but every time I turned to look, the room was empty. The breaking point was when I caught a glimpse of something in my monitor. It was a reflection just behind me in the dim light of the office. I saw the outline of a figure, his pun around my breath catching in my throat. But there was noon there. The office was empty, as it always was, but their reflection had been real. I knew it was that. When I started to panic, I called security, asking them to check the cameras, but they found nothing. Noon had entered or left the building all night. I was alone. At least I was supposed to be after that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every time I came in for my shift on me, even though I was the only one there, I started hearing voices, faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing. I'd be sitting at my desk, and I'd hear my name like someone was calling me from down the hall. But when I went to check, there was never anyone there. The footsteps became more frequent too. I'd hear them almost every night, walking up and down the hallways, sometimes stopping just outside my cubicle. I'd sit there frozen, waiting for them to move on, but they wouldn't. They'd just stop. And I'd feel the overwhelming sense that someone was standing there just on the other side of the wall, waiting for me to move. One night, after a particularly unsettling encounter where I'd seen a shadow pass by the window, even though I was on the 12th floor, I decided I needed to get to the bottom of this. I started asking around, trying to find out if anyone else had experienced anything strange in the building. That's when I learned about the accident years ago, before I started working there. An employee had died in the building. She had been working late one night, just like me, when she had a heart attack. No one found her until the next morning when the cleaning crew came in. She had been laying in her cubicle, her face pale, and her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The story sent chills down my spine. Could it be her? Was she the one haunting the office, unable to move on? It tried to brush it off as an old office legend, just a story meant to spook the night shift workers, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. The footsteps, the shadows, the whispers, they all started after I had taken the night shift, and they were getting worse. I was finishing up my work when I felt it again, that cold presence, that feeling of being watched. I stood up and looked around the empty office. It was quiet, too quiet. Then I heard it, a soft voice, whispering my name. It turned toward the sound. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw where a figure standing at the far end of the office, just beyond the glow of my desk lamp. She was pale here, eyes wide and vacant, their hair hanging limp around her face. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. She took a step forward, her feet making no sound on the carpeted floor. The lights flickered again, and she was gone. I grabbed my things and ran out of the office, not bothering to turn off my computer or lock up. I didn't care, I just needed to get out. I never went back to the night shift after that. I told my boss I couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't give him area, son. I didn't need to. The office is still there. Of course, people still work late shifts, but New never talks about the strange things that happen after dark. The cleaning crew has their own stories. Whispers of shadows moving in the hallways, of footsteps that shouldn't be there. But New never stays late alone anymore as form. I've moved on. I got a new job in a new building, and I don't work nights anymore, but I'll never forget that face, those empty, staring eyes, and I know that she's still there. I've been working the night shift at this warehouse for about 6 months. Honestly, it's not a bad job. Boring, yes, but not bad. I come in around 10 p.m. Clock in and spend the next 8 hours restocking shelves, organizing inventory, and preparing shipments. The warehouse is massive, filled with rows upon rows of towering shelves that stretch far into the distance, and at night, it's just me in the quiet. I'm not sure when it started. At first, I figured I was just tired working night shifts. Does that toy your mind play tricks on you in the dark? Especially in a place as big and empty as this, but lately I've been hearing little noises, footsteps, the soft creak of metal, and a faint scratching sound like something being dragged across the floor. I tried to brush it off, thinking it must be rats or pigeons, but something about the way those sounds echoed through the warehouse, bouncing off the concrete floors, and the towering shelves felt off, like someone was in here with me. But that's impossible. I'm the only one working the night shift, at least. That's what it hot the first time I really noticed something strange. It was a Thursday night, a few weeks ago. I was restocking one of the back aisles, the kind that doesn't get much foot traffic during the day. I had a pallet of boxes, town load, and was deep into the task when I heard a faint clatter like something had fallen over. I paused the sound through and for a moment, I stood there listening. Nothing. I shook my head, figuring it was just something that had shifted on the shelves, but then I heard it again, this time closer. I grabbed a flashlight and peered down the aisle. Everything seemed normal. The shelves were in place, the boxes stacked where I'd left them. I stood there for a moment, straining to hear anything else, but there was only silence. I shrugged it off, trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid. It was just the building settling. That's what I'd hold myself until the following night. I was organizing inventory near the back of the warehouse, the farthest point from the loading dock. The lights were always dimmer back there, and the air felt cooler, almost like the temperature dropped a few degrees. The further back you went, it was probably just a quirk off the building, but it always made me feel uneasy. I was about halfway through my shift when I saw a shadow. It darted between the rows of shelves. My hand gripped the box cutter a little tighter as my eyes scanned the aisles. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No response. I stood there waiting for the shadow to reappear, but nothing happened. It took a deep breath and moved closer to where I'd seen it, shining my flashlight down the aisle, but there was nothing. Just row after row of boxes and shelves, all neatly organized. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe I was just tired. It wouldn't be the first time my mind played tricks on me during a long shift. But something about the way that shadow moved, it didn't feel like a trick. Still, I pushed the thought aside and kept working, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The following week, the noises started getting worse. It wasn't just random clattering or the hum of the building anymore. I started hearing footsteps, clear, unmistakable footsteps. It always happened around the same time, sometime after midnight. I'd be working, minding my own business, when I'd hear them footsteps echoing through the warehouses. Sometimes they seemed far away, but other times they sounded like they were coming from the next aisle. I'd drop whatever I was doing and rush over, but knew was ever there. It didn't make sense. There were security cameras all over the warehouse, and I checked them whenever I heard something strange. Nothing. I was alone, but those footsteps, they were real. I know they were. One night, after hearing the footsteps said again, I decided to check the security footage more carefully. I went to the management office and started scrolling through the feed. Everything seemed normal until I got to the footage from the back of the warehouse. There on the screen, as I would have figured, it was faint, almost like a blur, but it was there, moving between rows of shelves, just like I'd seen in the corner of my eye. I paused the footage and stared at the screen. My heart was racing. I couldn't make out any details, just the shape of a person moving too quickly for the camera to focus. That's when I realized I wasn't imagining things. Something or someone was in the warehouse with me. The next night, I almost didn't come to work. I'd been feeling wunge for weeks, but I couldn't afford to miss a shift. Rent was due, and I needed the paycheck, so I clocked in, grabbed my clipboard, and got to work, trying to ignore the pit of dread in my thing. Was fine for the first couple of hours. Quiet, just like it always was, but around midnight, things started to go wrong. I was stacking boxes in one of the farazlas when I heard a crash from the front of the warehouse. My heart jumped into my throat as I grabbed my flashlight and hurried toward the sound. When I got there, I found a pallet of boxes scattered across the floor. It looked like someone had shoved the mover. It checked the security feed again, but the footage was useless, just static that had never happened before. I felt my stomach twist with unease as it tried to figure out what to do. Was someone messing with me, or was it something else? Before I could make a decision, the lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the faint beam. My flashlight. That's when I heard the footsteps, but this time they weren't far away. They were close, too close. I stood there, frozen listening as the footsteps grew louder, closer. My flashlight shook in my hand as slowly turned around, shining the beam down the aisle. And that's when I saw a figure standing at the far end of the aisle. It was tall, its face obscured by shadows, but I could see the faint outline of a person. They were just standing there, staring at me. I could feel my heart thawing against my ribs. As it tried to process what I was seeing, "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond. It took a step back, my hands shaking as it tried to keep the flashlight steady. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its gaze on me, cold and unrelenting. And then, without warning, it started moving toward me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. It turned and ran sprinting down the aisle east fast as I could hear the footsteps behind. Echoing off the walls, I darted through the maze of shelves, trying to find a way out. The warehouse felt like a labyrinth, the rows of boxes stretching out endlessly in every direction. I could hear the figure gaining on me, its footsteps growing louder with each passing second. Finally, I reached the loading dock. Islam made my hand against the emergency door release, and with a loud beep, the doors swung open. I stumbled outside, gasping for breath, and turned to look behind. But the figure was gone. The warehouse was silent, once more, as if nothing had happened. I stood there, trembling, trying to catch my breath. My mind raced with questions, but I didn't have any answers. I didn't know who or what that figure was, but I knew one thing for sure. I was never going back in there again. I quit the next day. The warehouse was haunted or something. I didn't care all. I knew that whatever had been in there with me that night wasn't human. I don't know what I saw that night, and I don't want. No, driving deliveries for a small career firm isn't my dream job, but it gets the bills covered most of the time. The work is straightforward: pick up the package, drop it off, repeat. I usually do day shifts, but with the holiday rush, I was asked to cover some night deliveries. At first, I was new with it, driving through quiet streets with not traffic, listening to my favorite podcasts on my first night. I was scheduled to deliver a few packages to a business district about an hour outside of town. It was already dark by the time I left the warehouse, the kind of cold, moonless night that made everything seem a little more sinister. Still, I wasn't too worried. I'd done late night runs before and never had any issues. The business district I was heading to was a weird spot, though it was part of an industrial park with rows of warehouses and offices tucked away in a remote area just off the main highway. The place was pretty much deserted after dark. Noon worked there at night, which meant it was usually quiet, almost too quiet. As I drove down the long stretch of road leading to the industrial park, I kept telling myself it was just another delivery in and out, but something felt different that night. The air felt the heavier, and there was a sense of unease I couldn't shake. I arrived at the industrial park just before midnight. The whole area was eerily silent, with only a few dim streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. The warehouses and office buildings loomed like silent giants, their windows dark and uninviting. I parked my van in front of the first building on my large nondescript office with a plain concrete exterior. I grabbed the package from the back of the van and walked toward the entrance. It was supposed to be a simple drop-off: scan the package, leave it in the designated drop box, and go. But as I approached the door, I noticed something strange. The front door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see the dim glow of a flickering light. Inside, that wasn't normal. The places should have been locked up for the night. With noon around, I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should go inside and see if anyone was there, but my instincts told me to just drop the package and leave. I decided to leave it in the drop box and get out of the rees. I scanned the package. I felt like someone was watching me. I couldn't explain it. It was just this creeping sensation that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand one. I finished the delivery and quickly walked back to my van, trying to shake off the feeling. But as I climbed into the driver's seat, I glanced back at the building. The door was now closed. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the wind had blown the door shut. Though I didn't hear any noises. Still, I couldn't shake the unease as I headed to my next delivery. This one was at a warehouse on the verge of the industrial park, even more isolated than the first location. I followed the narrow, winding road that led to the building. My headlights, the only light, the warehouse loomed ahead, its metal siding glinting faintly in the dim light. I parked the van near the entrance and grabbed the package. As I approached the door, I saw something, or rather someone, standing near the back of the building. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I got closer, I could make out the figure of a man standing perfectly still near the loading dock. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing away from me. His posture was unnaturally stiff, like he was waiting for something. I called out, my voice echoing through the quiet night. "You work here?" The figure didn't respond. He didn't move at all. I felt my heart rate quicken as I took a step closer, my hand tightening around the package. Something about the way he was standing, the stillness of it, sent a chill down my spine. It took another step forward, but just as I did, the figure vanished. I blinked, my mind racing to make sense of what I'd just seen. 1 second. Huace there, and the next that was gone like he just disappeared. In Huace there, and the next that was gone like he package. A fan rushed back to my van. It started the engine, my hand shaking, and spit out of the re without looking back. The rest of my deliveries were supposed to be routine, but after the encounter at the warehouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong every time. It turned a corner or parked outside another building a part of. I thought I might see that figure standing there watching me. It wasn't until my final delivery of the night that things really took a turn for the worse. My last stop was at a small office building at the very edge of the industrial park. The place looked abandoned, no lights, no cars in the lot, and the windows were covered in grime like noon had been there for years, but the address matched the one on the packages. Oh, I figured it was just an old building that hadn't been updated in the system. I parked the van and got out, the cold air biting at my skin. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft crunch of gravel under my boots. As I walked toward the building, as I approached the front door, I noticed something strange, a piece of paper taped to the glass. It looked like some kind of note hastily written in red marker. I squinted in the dim light, trying to make out the words, "Leave now, you're being watched." My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the note, my mind racing. Was this some kind of prank, a joke left by a bored employee? But then I remembered the figure I'd seen earlier, and my stomach churned with dread. Suddenly the air felt the aviar suffocating. I glanced around, but the lot was empty. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. I dropped the package at the door, my hands trembling, and turned to head back to the van. But as I started walking, I heard a soft rustling sound coming from behind me. It froze my breath, catching in my throat. Slowly, it turned around. The figure back, he was standing in the shadows near the corner of the building, just far enough away that I couldn't make out his features. But I knew it was him, the same figure I'd seen at the warehouse, the same unnerving stillness, the same eerie presence. Hadn't moved, didn't make a sound. He just stood there. Panic surged through me as I turned and ran to the van, my heart pounding in my ears. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking solidly. I could barely get the door open. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. But as I started the engine, is a whim again. He was standing in the middle of the road directly in front of the van. His face was still obscured by shadows, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning through the darkness. I didn't wait. I floored the gas pedals, whirring around him. My headlights caught a brief glimpse of his figure as I sped past him. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, he was gone. I drove out of that industrial park as fast as I could, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I kept looking in the mirrors, but the road behind me was empty. I didn't stop driving until I was back on the highway, miles away from the industrial park. My heart was still racing and my mind was spinning with questions. Who was that figure? Why was he following me? And what the hell did that note mean? I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just some kind of prank or coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something about that night felt different. Like I had crossed some invisible line into a place I wasn't supposed to be. I finished my route and returned to the warehouse to drop off the van. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched as I handed in my keys and clocked out. I saw the dispatcher looking at me with a strange expression. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but then he shook his head and handed me receipt, everything. Okay, I asked, my voice is sounding more casual than I felt, but hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, it's just strange. Another driver reported seeing someone hanging around the industrial park last week, so I'd creeped him out. Me stomach dropped. Did they say what he looked like? I asked. He shook his head. No, just said he felt like he was being followed. I didn't say anything after that. I just left. It's been a few days since that night, and I haven't gone back to work. I told him I was sick, but the truth is I'm scared I'll see him again. If these stories kept you one gem, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling content. Don't forget, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chilling upload. Have your own night shift. Horror-s. Tori, share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. Stay safe out there. And remember, sometimes the scariest things happen when the world is asleep. Until next time.